and book a reality. Recipients have included the influential democracy scholar Pippa Norris, the voting rights advocate Desmond Meade, and the Irish Citizens Assembly Project. Larry and Lynn, we're so grateful that you've given us the opportunity to recognize so many leaders and giants who stand up for democracy, often against insurmountable odds. We're so pleased at the Institute and throughout the College of the Liberal Arts, we are again able to recognize an important champion of democracy and will continue to do so for years to come. Larry? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so if you can't hear me, I tend to talk loudly, but if you can't hear me, just let me know. And thank you all for coming. It's funny Michael mentions Susan Welsh, because every year I start by thanking four people. Ted and Tracy McCourtney for their generosity and insight in the formation of the McCourtney Institute for Democracy. John Gastel, the Institute's first director, who along with Mark Major worked with me to establish the criteria for the award. And Susan Welsh. Many of you knew Susan as I did, a woman of great insight, great vision, and great fortitude. The McCourtney Institute for Democracy, the Richard Center for the Study of the Civil War, the Rock Ethics Institute, all her great ideas. So I wouldn't say that Susan strong-armed Lynn and I into endowing the medal, but I wouldn't say she didn't. I would say that I thought of the idea right about the same time she told me she had a great idea. And I have to admit, it was a great idea. And Lynn and I have been delighted, and this is one of our favorite nights of the year. And I am willing to wager that a bunch of great ideas came out of the McCourtneys after they had dinner with Susan also. When Lynn and I first established the Democracy Medal, our country faced challenges which unfortunately still exist today. A polarized and paralyzed political system and a disenchanted public. The thought was that the medal would shine a light on the great work and the amazing individuals and organizations who advance new ideas and ideals while flying under the radar as champions of the cause of democracy. So here we are, 10 years since we started awarding these medals. Each of the recipients has been a pillar of strength who in many cases triumphed against all odds, none more so than this year's recipient. I know many of you attended the screening of the documentary about her last night, but for the rest of you, let me tell you about this incredibly courageous woman. The 10th anniversary Brown Democracy Medal goes to Nasrin Sotoudeh, an Iranian lawyer and human rights activist who has been called Iran's Nelson Mandela. Sotoudeh has dedicated her legal career to representing opposition activists in Iran, minors facing unfair sentences, and women who protested Iran's mandatory hijab law. Her clients have included Nobel Peace Prize laureate Shirin Ebadi and pro-democracy activist Heshmat Tabarzadeh. Her colleagues in this long-running struggle include Nargis Mohammadi, and if her name sounds familiar, it's because about a month ago she was announced as the 2023 Nobel Peace Prize recipient, and she has been a beneficiary of Nasrin's legal counsel. In fact, the Nobel Committee used the tagline, "Women, Life, Freedom," in announcing the award, which is also the title of Nasrin's book. Sotoudeh is also a longtime opponent of the death penalty. She co-founded the organization Campaign for Step-by-Step Abolition of the Death Penalty to advocate for legislation that would abolish capital punishment in Iran. In 2021, she was named one of Time's 100 most influential women in the world. She has launched and participated in a number of hunger strikes, including during the pandemic, a 47-day hunger strike to protest poor health conditions and the risk of COVID-19 in Iranian prisons. This is the 10th year we have given this award, and I am struck that this year's recipient is different from any that preceded her. All have certainly weathered struggles, But for most, they also experienced change and success along the way. Desmond Meade, our honoree 2 years ago, fought to restore voting rights to convicted felons in Florida who had served their sentences. He got to see the passing of a state constitutional amendment that did exactly that. States United, last year's winner, got to savor many of their battles come to success in last fall's elections. But for this year's honoree, the struggles still continue. The battle is ongoing. Because of her work, Sotoudeh has been repeatedly imprisoned by the Iranian government for crimes against the state. She served one sentence in 2010 to 2013. While presently on medical furlough from serving her 2018 sentence of 38 and a half years and 148 lashes, she faces the prospect that her furlough could be revoked at any time, and she would have to return to prison to serve her sentence. Of course, she cannot be here with us today, but we are delighted that accepting the Brown Democracy Medal on her behalf are the filmmakers Jeff Kaufman and Marcia S. Ross, who made the 2020 documentary Nasrin and have known her since 2016. It is my distinct pleasure to present the 10th anniversary Brown Democracy Medal to Nasrin Sotoudeh. Jeff and Marcia, please join me at the podium. What do I do? Do I pick it up?
Yes, you do. You do.
Huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
I want you to be the person.
Oh, it actually says something on the back. The Lawrence and Lynn Brown Democracy Medal presented to Nasrin Sotoudeh, October 26, 2023, McCourtney Institute for Democracy.
That was a fantastic speech.
Thank you.
I gotta, wait. Okay. Is it, okay. Thank you to Penn State University and to the McCourtney Institute for Democracy, to those who worked tirelessly to organize this event, and to everyone here. And thank you to Larry and Lynn Brown. As a public health attorney and a teacher, they exemplify the values of justice and service that this honor celebrates. We are pleased to accept the 2023 Lawrence and Lynn Brown Democracy Medal on behalf of Nasrin Sotoudeh. Later, we'll share a short video message from Nasrin herself. We'll speak tonight about Nasrin's life and work and her fearless commitment to human rights. But this award is about much more than this lawyer, activist, mother, and frequent political prisoner. Nasrin's vision and sacrifice represent women and men all over the world who face harassment, imprisonment, and even death because they challenge intolerance and repression.
To start, we'd like to pay tribute to the McCourtney Institute for Democracy's increasingly vital mission to defend and advance democracy in the United States and abroad. More than ever, we need institutions and individuals to demonstrate that democracy and the quality of life that comes with it is worth fighting for. We need people like Nasrin Sotoudeh. We've been blessed to have a unique friendship with Nasrin that defies the distance between us and the difference in our backgrounds.
My father was an attorney and what was called in the 1970s a Rockefeller Republican politician. He served on the Mount Vernon City Council and on the Westchester County Board of Supervisors, and he was elected to 4 terms in the New York State Assembly. Working on his campaigns was a family affair, and going to the polls as a little girl with my mom and dad gave me a lifelong appreciation of what it means to vote. I made sure to pass that on to my daughter.
My first political act reflected my parents' conservative views. At age 9, I set up a Goldwater for President booth on our front lawn with buttons, bumper stickers, and lawn signs. In 1968, I evolved to supporting Robert Kennedy. Years later, I ran the Clinton-Gore campaign in Addison County, Vermont, and served on my local school board. Like Marcia and millions of others, every election I make phone calls and knock on doors for my favorite politicians and causes. You win some, you lose some, and democracy endures. This shared appreciation for grassroots change is a big part of what led us to make a documentary about Nasrin. Often called the Nelson Mandela of Iran, Nasrin has fought in the courts and on the streets for the rights of women, children, religious and ethnic minorities, journalists, artists, and nonviolent opponents of the regime. She has also been a fierce critic of the death penalty.
She has paid a high price for her beliefs. Nasrin was imprisoned from 2010 to 2013 with long stretches in solitary confinement. She was again imprisoned from 2018 to 2021, when she was released on medical furlough while suffering from a heart condition and COVID. She could be hauled back to prison at any time to serve the balance of her decade-long sentence, but she refuses to be silent. In addition, Nasrin's equally remarkable husband, Reza Khandan, has served time in prison for supporting his wife and for his own human rights activism. At this moment, the government has frozen the family bank account, and Reza is home on bail with a 5-year sentence hanging over his head. The crime he was arrested for? Making and distributing buttons that say, "I pose the mandatory hijab." We're wearing exact replicas of these buttons in solidarity with Nasrin, Reza, and all their colleagues in this struggle.
When you see Nasrin and Reza together, there is a balance and respect and sweetness that is really touching. At the same time, they have a steely strength that has carried them through incredible hardships. No matter how difficult things are, and things are often very difficult for them, we always share something to laugh about, and they always ask about what's going on in our life. They also adore their daughter Mereva and their son Nima, and are determined to have them grow up in a stable and nurturing way. That's not easy when a key government tactic is to purposely punish the families of those it deems a threat. Nasrin and Reza make clear that real greatness is revealed by how one acts in private, not just in public.
Here is a clip from our documentary, Nasrin, about how they met and married. It features the voice of their friend, Marcia, who lives in exile in the Netherlands. Nasrin's letter to Reza is read by Academy Award-winning actress Olivia Colman.
I first heard about Nasrin Sotoudeh in 2011 while making a film with Amnesty International about the persecution of the Baha'i faith in Iran. People spoke in awe about how this woman, who was raised in a traditional Muslim family, repeatedly put herself at risk to defend Baha'is, Zoroastrians, Sufis, Kurds, and other oppressed minority groups. This is a previously unused quote from our film with Nasrin that speaks to her concerns and to the harsh reality of life in her country. She says, "The Baha'i community in Iran faces heavy systematic pressure. They get arrested, get convicted to long years of imprisonment, their houses are raided, they get fired from their work, they cannot enroll in universities, they're not allowed to bury their dead in public ceremonies, and sometimes they are murdered. I have represented them legally for many different issues. In the whole of Iran, more than 500 Baha'i-owned shops were forcibly closed by the authorities during the last 4 years. One of my clients is a Baha'i man who constructed a building and carefully observed all the rules set by the city. When the building was finished, the government gave orders to destroy it simply because of his faith. I went to the Court of Administrative Justice, and fortunately I managed to get a sentence in his favor. This made us very happy." As Larry Brown and other attorneys know, this is not glamorous work. It's tedious, often frustrating, and for Nasrin, usually pro bono. It's also one of the reasons we are honoring this extraordinary woman.
We reached out to Nasrin about a possible documentary in early 2016. It was a time of mounting Islamophobia stoked by cynical figures who use hate to raise money and to build a political base. In 2015, then presidential candidate Trump called for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States. That same year, the man who would later become his national security advisor wrote in the New York Times that we should bomb Iran and force regime change. So much for learning the lessons of history. We wanted to tell Nasrin's story in part to counter this kind of rhetoric and to show that there's a lot we can learn from people and culture of that often misunderstood country. For over 2 years, single-person camera crews secretly filmed Nasrin, putting themselves at risk wherever they went. Thanks to them, we encountered countless individuals yearning to express themselves and to contribute to Iranian society. Here's a clip that covers a months-long demonstration Nasrin led in front of the Iran Bar Association to get her law license reinstated and in support of free speech. You'll see her holding a sign that says Farsi.
Many of the people who we just saw standing with Nasrin have been arrested in the years that followed. They knew the consequences, but they also knew that democracy is worth fighting for. And like John Lewis leading hundreds of voting rights marchers into billy clubs on Alabama's Edmund Pettus Bridge in 1965, they were, and they are to this day, undaunted. It's a reminder of how much we take for granted in our lives. The 2023 Freedom House Global Assessment of Political and Civil Liberties reports that worldwide freedom declined for the 17th consecutive year. Of 146 countries with more than 2 million residents, they report that only 39 are fully free. In this country, we've seen a presidential election disputed with lies and violence, while gerrymandering and laws that restrict voting rights have been established in dozens of states. Sadly, the International Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance most recent annual report labeled the United States, quote, a backsliding democracy.
This shift could have been predicted by one of Nasrin's favorite writers, Hannah Arendt. On Totalitarianism was published in 1951, and its focus is on Nazism and Stalinism. But in many ways, Arendt is speaking about our time. She wrote, "Before mass leaders seize power, their propaganda is marked by its extreme contempt for facts. For in their opinion, fact depends entirely on the power of the man who can fabricate it." In a recent email, Nasrin said, "I'm reading Hannah Arendt on totalitarianism for a second time. I'm astonished by her piercing intelligence and insights. I couldn't help but be moved by her intellectual courage. The sheer abundance of her analysis comes crashing down on the reader. Her work leaves me in awe." Nasrin also loves Václav Havel, and she read a biography of him right after she came home from Garchak prison. Mahatma Gandhi holds a special place in her heart, and there is a framed portrait of him by her desk with the quote, "The true measure of any society can be found in how it treats its most vulnerable members." All this serves as a vivid reminder that a love of liberty and a sense of solidarity have the ability to cross borders, even pass through prison walls, to teach, heal, and motivate.
A few months ago, in an interview with CNN, Nasrin said, "In the last few years that I was in prison, I noticed how important social media and technology are in the fight against oppression in Iran. Real change has to come from within, but democracy and the rest of the world can help fill the gap." This connection and this opportunity should speak to young people who are considering a commitment to human rights and to older people looking for a purpose and a way to give back. Our efforts really can lift lives across the globe. Women's rights are at the center of the change that Nasrin speaks. Women's rights are also at the center of protests that have swept Iran since the September 16, 2022 death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini after she was brutally arrested by the morality police for allegedly not properly wearing her hijab or headscarf. This points once again to the universal nature of Nasrin's work and vision. Following the U.S. Supreme Court's Dobbs decision that overturned Roe v. Wade, Nasrin wrote Ms. Magazine to express her sincere solidarity. She said in that letter, "After the 1979 Iranian Revolution, new laws that drastically stripped women and girls of their rights were part of an insidious effort to limit civil liberties for everyone. As someone who lived through and campaigned against this loss of freedom and democracy, I can offer a warning that it will not end with the Supreme Court decision on abortion." She continued, "Women in Iran continue to face laws that restrict rights over our bodies and even over the ability to think for ourselves. We are denied the same opportunities as men in relation to marriage, divorce, child custody, inheritance, and travel. This country's mandatory hijab law forces us to cover our heads whenever we're in public, but is also a way for conservative forces to exert political control. That control ensnares men, not just women. This may resemble what you experience in the fight for reproductive rights in America." A 2023 study by the Georgetown Institute for Women, Peace, and Security said, "Countries where women are doing well tend to be the same countries exhibiting strong indicators of democracy. The results show that empowering women and building resilient democracies go hand in hand."
This brings us to an intersection in Tehran on December 27, 2017. On that day, a young woman publicly removed her headscarf to demonstrate her opposition to Iran's compulsory hijab laws. More protests soon followed, and dozens were arrested, many of whom were represented by Nasrin Sotoudeh. This clip from the documentary will take you to that pivotal time. Nargis Husseini faced 10 years in prison, but Nasrin was able to get her sentence reduced to 3 months, including time served. On June 12, 2018, Jeff and I had a Skype call with Nasrin and Reza on their cell phone while they had an evening stroll through a Tehran park. We could see the light slowly fading as they walked along a tree-lined path, then headed back toward their car. We talked about the documentary, our children, what might come from the recent withdrawal of the United States from the Iran nuclear deal, and Nasrin's involvement with the anti-hijab demonstrations. They were, as usual, in surprisingly good spirits. The next day, 5 security officers showed up at their home, arrested Nasrin, and took her to Evin prison. We found out later that she had been secretly sentenced to decades in prison and dozens of lashes on charges that included inciting corruption and prostitution, disrupting public order, propaganda against the state, and collusion against national security. In September, their home was searched. Thousands of the "I oppose the mandatory hijab" buttons were confiscated and destroyed, and Reza was also sent to Evin prison. Reza was released on bail after 111 days. He was told to stay silent, but he immediately helped lead an international campaign for his wife's freedom.
In August 2020, Nasrin launched a 47-day hunger strike to protest health conditions and COVID-19 infections in Iranian hospitals. As the days mounted, we feared the worst. It was a terrifying time, but she held on despite the toll. Being locked up in one of the world's worst prisons, separated for years from your husband and children, while still finding ways to confront the authorities, would be more than enough for most people. Not Nasrin. One day, a package arrived in the mail for Marcia and me that had traveled a circuitous route from Iran. We carefully opened it and found a stunning piece of artwork, an arrangement of pressed flowers in a homemade frame. We spoke to Reza, and he explained that Nasrin made it and somehow smuggled it out of prison. She had picked the flowers in a prison courtyard. A fellow inmate taught her how to dry and press them, and a Baha'i prisoner made the frame from scraps of wood. This says everything about Nasrin. She can bring people together to find beauty and meaning in the most unimaginably dark circumstances, and she refuses to accept the way the government and its allies try to control her. Now she is home in a legal limbo, facing regular harassment and threats of re-imprisonment. As you've seen, she continues to speak out for democratic change.
In this country, we are 1 year away from an election that will determine the presidency, Congress, and in essence, the future of this planet. Nothing is certain, and it's easy to despair. Fortunately, we've been able to turn to Nasrin and ask how she finds hope in uncertain times. In a recent conversation, she said, "The movement for women's rights in Iran has experienced many setbacks, but it perseveres because my country is full of people who care about fairness and justice. All of us know that the fate of humanity, the human condition, is that all the threads of our lives are entangled and connected. So that is the foundation of the work, an awareness of that connection. As for losing hope, when one is confronted by injustice or officials who break the law, I have to point out that we've had many, many, many instances where, despite their inclinations, they have been forced to grant rights that otherwise they would not. So we have obtained some of our goals, we've had some triumphs, we have forced change, even in these most difficult of circumstances. Hope stays alive." Nasrin went on to say, and finally, democratic resistance and a belief in civil society always pays off in the long run. Yes, governments can be dictatorial and autocratic, and they can have all kinds of armies and weapons at their disposal. Despite this, we see them fail over and over again. And something better emerges because of humanity's collective will. I draw strength from all those experiences.
And we draw strength and hope from Nasrin Sotoudeh. We also draw strength and hope for the tenacious and brave people we've gotten to know through our work with Nasrin. In every country, there's a push for freedom that can't be crushed. And now it's up to us, each of us. The best way to honor Nasrin Sotoudeh is to support in whatever way you can the ideas and the efforts of those who strive for human rights and democracy in America, in Iran, and around the world. Thank you. We wish that she could be here with us in person, but now here is a video message from Nasrin Sotoudeh.
جایزه نوبل دموکراسی از طرف دانشگاه پنسیلوانیا امسال 2023 من این افتخار رو داشتم که به من تعلق گرفته. من دوست دارم از این فرصت استفاده کنم و در مورد شرایط منطقه‌مون صحبت کنم. جنگ ناعادلانه روسیه علیه اوکراین که باعث شده زنان و مردان معترض به جنگ زیادی علیه اونها احکام ناعادلانه صادر بشه. مارینا اوسیانلووا و همینطور الکسی ناوالنی، همه اینها و زنان و مردانی که ما اسم هنوز نمیدونیم به حبس‌های طولانی مدتی محکوم شدن. همچنین دوست دارم به حق آزادی زنان در منطقه خودمون و به منع تحصیل زنان در افغانستان اشاره کنم. من دوست دارم به حجاب اجباری در ایران اشاره کنم و میخوام که توجه جهانیان رو به وضعیت آرمیتا گراوند، دختر 16 ساله ایرانی جلب کنم که به خاطر برای حجاب اجباری مورد خشونت فیزیکی شدید قرار گرفت. امروز که شنبه 15 می هست و من دارم با شما صحبت میکنم، آرمیتا 1 هفته است که در کما به سر میبره. قلب همه ما از این ظلم فشرده میشه و همه از صمیم قلب آرزو میکنیم آرمیتا هر چه زودتر به زندگی برگرده. ما حق زنان حق رانندگی دارن، حق تحصیل و آموزش دارن و حق دارن پوشششون رو خودشون انتخاب کنن، نه به حجاب اجباری و نه به آپارتاید جنسیتی. ما به حجاب اجباری اعتراض داریم. متشکرم. نسرین سوتو.
Let me just mention that a few days ago it was announced that Armina, the woman she referenced, died from her injuries. I also should mention that you notice that Nasrin is wearing the button that many of you are wearing, and we have some more that we can pass out. And lastly, please note that she's outside not wearing a hijab. That simple act could get her arrested.
Yeah.
Thank you for courageous woman, Jeff and Marcia, and thank you for sharing her story. Every year, the remarks of the Brown winner are published in a short free from Cornell University Press. You can read more about Nasrin's story there. We have time for a few questions, so please raise your hand if you'd like to be called upon. And are you going to go around with the mic? Yeah. Why don't you guys come up, because I'm not going to answer the question. You're going to answer the question. Thank you. Thank you.
I don't have a question. I remembered something that I wanted to mention. Her last name means praiseworthy in Persian. I meant to tell you that last night when we watched the movie. Her first name is a flower.
Wild Rose.
Yes.
Yes.
And her last name is praiseworthy. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Other questions? While folks are collecting their thoughts, I know one thing that was shown in the film that we did not get to see today, there was a wonderful scene of Nasrin essentially opening her fan mail from her supporters from around the world. Can you just talk more about what her impact is and how folks express that to her?
Well, that's an example of a two-way connection, because her husband, who's so loving, saved all these letters and missives, and especially from kids that she got while she was in prison, and she came out of prison to see them. And it shows how people around the world can lift the spirits of people who are doing great service but at risk in other countries. But it also shows how she, by her example, even though she can't leave Iran, and the government tries very hard to keep her silent, has been able to touch lives everywhere. And we've seen that in our work. We've been so touched by the people we've worked with in dozens of countries who love Nasrin and want to apply the lessons of her life and work to their countries.
Yeah, I would also say do not underestimate the fact that an award like this provides a couple of things. One, hope for Nasrin. It helps her continue because she realizes she has the support. But also, it keeps the government away from her. The more we can speak about her, the more well-known she is, the more difficult it is for the government to really hurt her. It really supports her in the work.
Yeah, I guess the last thing to say is that her husband Reza would tell her stories about the film when she was in prison, and she said to us when she got out of prison that sometimes she would lie in bed at night and think about what he said, and it would give her some strength to keep going. But of course, we get a lot of strength from her, so we get the better end of the deal.
I said, we've gotten to know her very well, obviously. We talk to her pretty regularly. And I think you can see, in the film, she has a tremendous optimism. I mean, that's no lie. And she laughs, she has a great sense of humor. And I think that, I always say that, well, that's her superpower, In spite of everything, she's able to keep looking forward and stay really positive. And I think that really, really helps in all of these dire situations. And the other thing I really love about her, truly, Jeff mentioned it in the speech, but she's always thinking about other people. I mean, people write, do things for her, write about her, and she will write them thank you notes. Even when she was in prison, she'd write them, and Reza would get them, and she would send them off. She has a way of really always focusing on others. She doesn't make it about herself. It's always about the others that she's dealing with.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that, those themes really call to mind so many of our previous Brown Medal recipients. I'm thinking about Desmond Meade, who was mentioned in the introduction, went from, literally getting ready to jump in front of train tracks and commit suicide after he got out of prison to restoring voting rights for many, many people throughout Florida. And so, and also, again, the not focus on himself. I think about the Irish Citizens Assembly Project, which came together to have a dialogue about abortion in Ireland, one of the most contentious topics there, and again, they never doubted that they could do it. So yeah, I think those themes carry through for sure. Other questions? Anyone else have a question? Yeah, Ted.
In watching the documentary, I was struck by the fact that Nasrin focused heavily in her objection to the mandatory use of the hijab. And it seemed to be her belief if she could resist that is, make that non-mandatory, then other women's rights would follow. Is there any evidence that might happen if she could be successful in her first initiative?
Yeah, I think it shows how perceptive she is. I've often thought of her as a great chess player. Like when the government tries to use a tactic against her, she flips it and makes the government look bad. And when you think about the tragic death of Mahsa Amini and how that's continued most recently, it's often revolved around being forced to wear a hijab and the protest of dress laws. That doesn't represent all the anti-women laws, as she makes clear, but it's a highly public one that's visible, and it's like a wedge point. And so I think it's a brilliant tactic that has resonated over the years, and that she has been at the forefront of. I think that it kind of humanizes and makes clear the grotesque repression from the regime.
Yeah, I mean, I would concur. I mean, I know she says
I hope so.
Yes, of course I would. But but I think she talks about it a lot in the film, that it's not the hijab itself. I mean, it's what it represents. Because it's not that she's saying if people want to wear the hijab, sure, but we shouldn't be forced to, because it really represents the repression of telling us how to think. It represents everything, and we've learned, I think, from the work we've done, how important it is to have a person or a focal thing. Mm-hmm. When a movement is, just the movement, it's difficult for people to kind of get behind it. It's an interesting thing. But if people can focus on like an individual or a particular cause that they can really identify, this can really bring people together. And I think that's what Jeff also, that's why I totally agree with what you're saying.
Oh, good. Thank you. But also, she has this wonderful quote where she says, "If the government can tell you what you have to wear, they can tell you what you have to think." And so there's a direct connection between those things. And we also see that as a continuation of the struggle for women's rights around the world, a woman's right to choose the way she lives, what she wears, how she thinks, what she does. It's not just in Iran, and it's very pertinent for our country right now.
Any other questions?
Can I add to that? I think they can hear me. It makes me feel weird. I just wanted to say, you talked about how most of the people that received this award, I think Chris did, or I'm sorry if I forget your name. Her work has been very fruitful. For Iranians at least, it's very visible. When I was growing up, our culture doesn't celebrate boldness. Our culture doesn't celebrate fighting to say, this is my right, this is not what I want to wear. That's not, I was told to toe the line. I was told to not to be confrontational. When the morality police stopped me and my father came to pick me up, and I was crying because they were insulting my mother and calling her names and saying that she is that's why I am not covered up, he told me that I'll forget about it tomorrow. That was our approach for years. But if you go to Iran now and you see the 16-year-olds now, nobody can tell them what to wear. That's because of Nasrin, that's because of Nargis, that's because of Shirin, that's because of women like that. The past 40 years, it might not show in any index that the outside world can see, but we see it. And it's soul crushing when 2008, even after the revolution, the women got up and protested. 2 years ago that we did again. Yet last year there was a movement. It's soul crushing. It never gets anywhere. They have all the power. But I am hopeful because of people like her that it will change. And I see it. I see it in the youth, in the 16-year-olds that I wish I could be. Thank you so much. Thank you.
If there are no other questions, I think that's a fantastic note to end us on. Please join me again in thanking Jeff Marcia.
You're watching CNET, Center County's Government and Educational Access Network.
The League of Women Voters was founded almost 100 years ago with the right to vote for women. Not only the right to vote, but an informed vote.
You need to know everything about that candidate. You need to be able to ask that candidate questions.
I think that the organization is going to continue to attract a diverse membership, and I think that that will help us in working toward the goal of better representation for everybody.
There's a wonderful opportunity here for people who are younger to come and learn from women who have been part of social movements for years and years.
It's our job to be a mentor to the newer members because they're the ones, after all, that are going to be carrying the banner of the League into the next 100 years. We stand for the nonpartisanship that we should all have as leaders in our democracy today.